Hi, my name's Jack, and I've been married to Linda for 40 years. For decades, think about that. That's a lifetime of memories, kids, holidays, good days, bad days, and everything in between. To the outside world, our marriage was rock solid, the kind of love story people dream about. But on the night of our anniversary, I realized that nothing was quite as it seemed. It started with a perfect evening. Linda and I went to the same restaurant where I had proposed to her all those years ago. I'd made the reservations weeks in advance and even had the staff set up the same table by the window. Linda looked stunning, as she always did. Her smile lit up the room, and for a moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. After dinner, I raised my glass and gave a toast. I wasn't trying to be poetic or overly romantic. I just spoke from the heart. I talked about how much she meant to me, how grateful I was for the life we built together, and how I couldn't imagine spending my days with anyone else. Linda smiled, and there were tears in her eyes, but something about her expression felt off. On the drive home, I noticed she was quieter than usual. I chalked it up to her being overwhelmed by the evening, but in the back of my mind, a tiny voice whispered that something wasn't right. I ignored it. After all, we'd been together for so long. What could possibly be wrong? That night, as we got ready for bed, I hugged Linda and told her how much I loved her. She hugged me back, but it felt different, a little too tight, like she was holding on for dear life. I asked her if she was okay, and she just smiled and said, "Of course, Jack, I'm just tired." The next few days were strange. Linda seemed distracted, almost distant. She wasn't acting like herself. She avoided eye contact, made excuses to stay busy, and kept her phone close to her at all times. Now, I'm not a suspicious guy. I've never been the type to snoop or second-guess her. But something about her behavior put me on edge. One night, while she was in the shower, I noticed her phone buzz on the counter. A text popped up from a name I didn't recognize. "Let me know if he suspects anything." My stomach dropped. I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. What could that mean? Was it about me? When Linda came back, I acted like nothing was wrong, but my mind was racing. For the first time in my life, I felt like I couldn't trust her. I decided to give it a few days before saying anything. Maybe it was all just a misunderstanding, or maybe I was reading too much into it. But as the days passed, Linda's strange behavior continued. She seemed to avoid me, finding excuses to stay out of the house or spend time alone. One Sunday evening, I couldn't take it anymore. As she sat in the living room reading a book, I decided to confront her. "Linda," I said, my voice steady but firm, "we need to talk." She looked up, startled. "What is it?" I hesitated for a moment, then said, "I feel like something's been off lately. Is there something you need to tell me?" For a split second, I saw panic flash across her face, but then she forced a smile and said, "Jack, you're imagining things. Everything's fine." I didn't press her further that night, but I knew she was lying. Something was going on, and whether she wanted to tell me or not, I was going to find out. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Linda's behavior wasn't just unusual, it was downright suspicious. She seemed to be avoiding me in subtle ways. She'd leave the room whenever I walked in, spend hours on her phone, and make excuses to go out for errands at odd times. It was as if she was putting up walls where there had never been any before. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe the anniversary had stirred up some old emotions or memories that she wasn't ready to share. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. We'd always been open with each other, at least I thought we had. Then there was her phone. Linda had never been secretive about her phone before. In fact, she used to leave it lying around without a second thought. But now it was glued to her side. If I walked into a room where she was using it, she'd quickly turn it face down or shove it into her pocket. It wasn't like her at all. One evening, as she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I tried to strike up a conversation. "Who's keeping you so busy?" I asked with a light-hearted tone, hoping to sound casual. Linda froze for a moment before forcing a laugh. "Oh, just some of the ladies from book club," she said. "We're planning our next meeting." It sounded harmless enough, but something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. Her smile was too tight, her tone too rehearsed. It was as if she'd practiced the response in her head before I even asked. That night, as Linda slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I hated feeling this way, distrusting her, questioning her every move, but I couldn't ignore the nagging voice in the back of my mind. Something was going on, and if she wasn't going to tell me, I'd have to find out for myself. The next morning, while Linda was out running errands, I decided to do something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I went through her phone. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't ignore the growing knot in my stomach. Her phone was locked, of course, but I knew the passcode. It was our anniversary date. Ironic, given the circumstances. My hand shook as I unlocked the screen and began scrolling through her messages. Most of them were innocuous, texts with friends, reminders, and a few spam emails. But then I found a thread with a name I didn't recognize, Samantha. It was odd because Linda didn't have any close friends by that name. I opened the thread and my blood ran cold. The messages weren't from a Samantha at all. They were from a man. The content wasn't explicit, but it was enough to confirm my worst fears. Can't stop thinking about last week. I'll try to make it work Friday. Let me know when he's out. And the one that made my stomach churn. Thanks for covering for me last night. You're amazing. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, piecing together a story that Linda had clearly been hiding for a long time. When Linda came home later that day, I couldn't look at her. She greeted me with her usual smile, but it felt like a mask, a carefully constructed facade to hide the truth. "Is everything okay, Jack?" she asked, tilting her head with concern. I wanted to confront her then and there, but I wasn't ready. I needed more information, more proof. So I played along. "Yeah, just tired," I said, forcing a smile. That night after she fell asleep, I lay awake again, replaying the messages in my mind. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And more importantly, why? The next day, I decided to take things a step further. I contacted a private investigator. It felt extreme, but I needed answers, and I couldn't trust Linda to give them to me. A few days later, the investigator called with an update. He'd followed Linda to a small cafe on the other side of town. She'd met with a man, tall, well-dressed, probably in his late 50s. They sat in a secluded booth, talking closely, and when they left, they hugged for a little too long. I asked the investigator to keep digging, but at this point I didn't need much more evidence. My gut told me everything I needed to know. Linda was having an affair, and I was living in a lie. But now that I knew, the question was, what was I going to do about it? The days after the private investigator's update were some of the longest of my life. Every moment with Linda felt surreal, like I was watching a stranger play the role of my wife. Her laughter, her small talk, her casual touches, they all felt like a cruel performance designed to keep me in the dark. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I needed more details. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? Was this just some fleeting mistake, or had she built a second life behind my back? The private investigator didn't disappoint. A few days later, he handed me a folder filled with pictures and detailed notes. The man's name was Peter. He owned a local accounting firm, and as it turned out, he and Linda had been meeting for nearly 2 years. The photos showed them together at restaurants, a hotel, and even at a park where Linda had always claimed she went for her solo walks. But the most damning evidence was a short video taken just a week prior. In it, Linda and Peter were sitting in his car, talking. The audio wasn't perfect, but I could hear enough. "I can't keep this up much longer," Linda said, her voice shaky. "You don't have to," Peter replied. "I'm ready whenever you are. Just say the word." She nodded but looked conflicted. "It's just Jack. He doesn't deserve this." "Jack will be fine," Peter said, leaning closer. "You deserve to be happy, Linda. Don't let guilt hold you back." Watching that video felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that she was wrestling with leaving me entirely. After 40 years of marriage, she was planning to throw it all away for this man. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Linda had gone to bed, staring at the folder of evidence. My anger simmered just below the surface, but beneath that was a deep sadness. How had we gotten here? What had I done, or failed to do, that pushed her into someone else's arms? But as the night wore on, sadness gave way to determination. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I wasn't going to let Linda and Peter make a fool of me any longer. The next morning, I decided it was time to confront her. I waited until she had her coffee in hand and was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone like everything was normal. "Linda," I said, my voice calm but firm. She looked up, startled by my tone. "Yes?" "We need to talk." She set her phone down, her expression cautious. "What about?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I placed the folder on the table in front of her. "About this." Her eyes widened as she opened the folder and saw the pictures. Her face drained of color, and for a moment she looked like she might faint. "Jack, I can explain," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Explain what?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. "Explain how you've been sneaking around with Peter for 2 years? Explain how you've been lying to my face while planning to leave me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. Not yet. "It's not what you think," she began, but I cut her off. "Don't insult me, Linda. I've seen the video. I've read the messages. I know everything." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't plan for this to happen." "But it did," I said, my voice rising. "You let it happen. You made choices, Linda. Choices that betrayed everything we built together." For a moment, the only sound in the room was her crying. I waited, giving her the chance to tell me the truth. "It started 2 years ago," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I met Peter through a friend. At first it was just casual, harmless. But then things got complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, bitterness dripping from the word. "Linda, you didn't trip and fall into an affair. You made a choice. You had a chance to stop this and you didn't." She nodded, wiping her tears. "You're right. I was selfish. I didn't think about how this would hurt you." "No," I said, my tone sharp. "You didn't think about me at all." She broke down again, and for a moment I felt a pang of pity, but it wasn't enough to erase the anger or the betrayal. "What happens now, Linda?" I asked after a long silence. "Are you going to leave me for him, or were you planning to keep sneaking around until I found out?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know what I want." Her words stung more than anything else she'd said. After 40 years of marriage, she didn't even know if she wanted to stay with me. I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. "Figure it out, Linda," I said, my voice cold, "because I won't live like this. You have until the end of the week to decide what you want, him or me, but if you choose him, don't expect me to make it easy for you." I walked out of the house then, needing air, space, and time to think. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but one thing was certain: my life would never be the same. The days after the private investigator's update were some of the longest of my life. Every moment with Linda felt surreal, like I was watching a stranger play the role of my wife. Her laughter, her small talk, her casual touches, they all felt like a cruel performance designed to keep me in the dark. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I needed more details. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? Was this just some fleeting mistake, or had she built a second life behind my back? The private investigator didn't disappoint. A few days later, he handed me a folder filled with pictures and detailed notes. The man's name was Peter. He owned a local accounting firm, and as it turned out, he and Linda had been meeting for nearly 2 years. The photos showed them together at restaurants, a hotel, and even at a park where Linda had always claimed she went for her solo walks. But the most damning evidence was a short video taken just a week prior. In it, Linda and Peter were sitting in his car talking. The audio wasn't perfect, but I could hear enough. "I can't keep this up much longer," Linda said, her voice shaky. "You don't have to," Peter replied. "I'm ready whenever you are. Just say the word." She nodded but looked conflicted. It's just Jack. He doesn't deserve this. Jack will be fine, Peter said, leaning closer. You deserve to be happy, Linda. Don't let guilt hold you back. Watching that video felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that she was wrestling with leaving me entirely. After 40 years of marriage, she was planning to throw it all away for this man. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Linda had gone to bed, staring at the folder of evidence. My anger simmered just below the surface, but beneath that was a deep sadness. How had we gotten here? What had I done or failed to do that pushed her into someone else's arms? But as the night wore on, sadness gave way to determination. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I wasn't going to let Linda and Peter make a fool of me any longer. The next morning, I decided it was time to confront her. I waited until she had her coffee in hand and was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone like everything was normal. Linda, I said, my voice calm but firm. She looked up, startled by my tone. Yes? We need to talk. She set her phone down, her expression cautious. What about? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I placed the folder on the table in front of her. About this. Her eyes widened as she opened the folder and saw the pictures. Her face drained of color, and for a moment she looked like she might faint. Jack, I can explain, she stammered, her voice trembling. Explain what? I asked, my voice steady but cold. Explain how you've been sneaking around with Peter for 2 years? Explain how you've been lying to my face while planning to leave me? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. Not yet. It's not what you think, she began, but I cut her off. Don't insult me, Linda. I've seen the video. I've read the messages. I know everything. She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. I'm so sorry, Jack. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't plan for this to happen. But it did, I said, my voice rising. You let it happen. You made choices, Linda. Choices that betrayed everything we built together. For a moment, the only sound in the room was her crying. I waited, giving her the chance to tell me the truth. It started 2 years ago, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I met Peter through a friend. At first it was just casual, harmless, but then things got complicated. Complicated, I repeated, bitterness dripping from the word. Linda, you didn't trip and fall into an affair. You made a choice. You had a chance to stop this and you didn't. She nodded, wiping her tears. You're right. I was selfish. I didn't think about how this would hurt you. No, I said, my tone sharp. You didn't think about me at all. She broke down again, and for a moment I felt a pang of pity, but it wasn't enough to erase the anger or the betrayal. What happens now, Linda? I asked after a long silence. Are you going to leave me for him, or were you planning to keep sneaking around until I found out? I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what I want. Her words stung more than anything else she'd said. After 40 years of marriage, she didn't even know if she wanted to stay with me. I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. Figure it out, Linda, I said, my voice cold, because I won't live like this. You have until the end of the week to decide what you want, him or me, but if you choose him, don't expect me to make it easy for you. I walked out of the house then, needing air, space, and time to think. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but one thing was certain, my life would never be the same. That week felt like the longest of my life. Every day stretched into an eternity, filled with awkward silences and unbearable tension. Linda avoided me as much as she could, but when we were in the same room, the air felt thick with unspoken words. I gave her space, as much for my own sanity as hers, but inside I was boiling. I spent hours replaying our conversation in my head, dissecting her words, her tears, her excuses. I don't know what I want. Those words haunted me. After 40 years of marriage, how could she not know? What had I been to her all these years? A placeholder until something better came along. On Wednesday, 3 days after our confrontation, I finally decided I couldn't wait in limbo anymore. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I found Linda in the kitchen, sipping her coffee and staring out the window like she was lost in another world. She didn't even notice me come in. "Have you made up your mind yet?" I asked, my voice breaking the silence like a hammer. She jumped, startled, and turned to face me. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she hadn't slept in days. "Jack," she started, her voice soft, "I just need a little more time." "Time for what?" I snapped. "To decide if you want to stay with a man who's loved you for 40 years or run off with someone you've known for 2. How much more time do you need, Linda?" She flinched at my words, and for a moment I felt a twinge of guilt. But then I remembered the pictures, the texts, the lies, and the guilt evaporated. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "Too late for that," I replied. "The damage is done. Now it's about what happens next. So tell me, Linda, what do you want?" She looked down at her coffee cup, her hands trembling. "I don't know," she whispered. "I love you, Jack. I do. But Peter, he makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. "Alive?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You mean sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face, and destroying our marriage makes you feel alive?" Linda didn't answer. She just stared down at her coffee, tears streaming down her face. "You've made your choice," I said, my voice flat. "If you want him, go to him, but don't expect to keep your comfortable life here while you do it." "Jack, please," she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to have it both ways. If you want to be with Peter, then you leave, and you leave everything behind. This house, the life we built, all of it. You don't get to take the best of both worlds and leave me with nothing." Linda was silent for a long time. Finally, she nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "You're right," she said quietly. "I've been selfish. I don't deserve you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I turned and left the kitchen, leaving her to sit with her thoughts. That night, Linda slept in the guest room, or at least I assume she did. I didn't see her after I went to bed. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the next day would bring. The next morning, I woke up to find Linda sitting at the dining table with a suitcase by her side. She looked pale and exhausted, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes. "I'm leaving," she said simply. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Is it him?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. "Fine," I said. "But don't think this is over, Linda. You don't get to walk away from 40 years of marriage without consequences." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She picked up her suitcase and walked out the door without another word. As I watched her drive away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a surprising sense of relief. It was over. The lie was finally exposed, and now I could start to rebuild my life. But I wasn't done yet. Linda might have left, but she wasn't going to walk away without feeling the weight of what she'd done. When the door shut behind Linda, the silence that filled the house was deafening. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where she had been, trying to process what had just happened. After 40 years, she was gone. Not just gone, but gone for him. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but the anger coursing through me was too strong. Crying felt like it would give her actions more power than they deserved. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and began to plan my next move. Linda had made her choice, but I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. 40 years of marriage wasn't just something you throw away without consequences. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't going to stoop to her level, but I was determined to protect what was mine and make sure she felt the weight of her decisions. The first step was practical: the finances. Over the years, I had worked hard to build up a comfortable life for us. Our house was paid off, we had savings, and my retirement fund was healthy. I wasn't about to let Linda waltz out the door with half of everything while she played house with Peter. I called our lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, who had handled our will and estate planning in the past. When I explained the situation, she didn't mince words. "Jack, you've got a strong case here," she said. "But you need to act quickly. Start gathering every financial document you can. Bank statements, tax returns, anything that shows where your assets are. We'll make sure you're protected." I spent the rest of the day combing through our files, pulling out anything and everything Karen might need. It felt surreal, sitting in the same house we had shared for decades, dividing up the life we had built together. The next step was more personal. I wasn't just going to let Linda disappear into her new life without holding her accountable for what she had done. I didn't want to be petty, but I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences. A few days later, I made a decision. I invited our two grown children, Sarah and Michael, over for dinner. I hadn't told them anything yet. I wasn't sure how to bring it up, but they deserved to know the truth. That evening, as we sat around the dining table, I took a deep breath and told them everything. I explained Linda's affair, how long it had been going on, and the choice she had made to leave. Their reactions were a mix of shock, anger, and sadness. Michael clenched his jaw, his fists balled on the table. "I can't believe Mom would do this," he said, "after everything you've done for her." Sarah was quieter, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't deserve this." "I don't," I admitted, the words bitter on my tongue, "but it happened, and now we have to move forward." They both offered their support, promising to stand by me no matter what. It was a small comfort, but it meant the world to me. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers, dividing assets, and trying to figure out what my life would look like without Linda. She stayed out of my way, and I stayed out of hers. But then something unexpected happened. One evening, as I was sorting through some old boxes in the attic, I came across a photo album from our early years of marriage. I flipped through the pages, looking at pictures of our wedding, our first home, the kids as babies. For the first time since Linda left, I felt a pang of sadness. Not for her, but for what we had lost, the life we had built, the memories we had shared. It all felt like it had been tainted by her betrayal. But as I closed the album and set it aside, I realized something. While Linda's actions had shattered the illusion of our marriage, they hadn't erased the good times we had shared. I couldn't let her choices define the rest of my life. The next morning, I called Karen and asked her to expedite the divorce process. I was done dwelling on the past. It was time to focus on the future. But just as I was beginning to find some semblance of peace, Linda called. "Jack," she said, her voice shaky, "can we talk?" I hesitated, gripping the phone tightly. "What is there to talk about, Linda?" "Please," she said, almost pleading, "just hear me out." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met later that evening at a nearby coffee shop, and when I saw her sitting there, looking as worn out as I felt, I couldn't help but wonder what she had to say. "I made a mistake," she began, tears already streaming down her face. "Leaving you, it was the biggest mistake of my life." When I walked into the coffee shop and saw Linda sitting there, she looked like a shadow of the confident woman I had confronted weeks ago. Her eyes were red, her hair disheveled, and she seemed smaller, almost fragile. For a moment I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly reminded myself why we were here. I sat down across from her, folding my hands on the table. "You wanted to talk, Linda. Go ahead." She hesitated, looking down at her coffee cup as if searching for the right words. Finally, she spoke. "Jack, I've made terrible mistakes. I betrayed your trust, and I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to imagine. I thought I wanted something different, something more exciting. But I was wrong." I said nothing, letting her words hang in the air. "I left because I thought Peter was what I needed," she continued, her voice trembling. "But the truth is he wasn't. I don't even know what I saw in him. The past few weeks have been a wake-up call, Jack. I miss you. I miss us. I want to come home." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me had longed to hear her say that, to admit her mistakes and ask for forgiveness. But the other part of me, the part that had spent weeks stewing in anger and betrayal, couldn't believe what I was hearing. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. So what happens now, Linda? You just decide Peter's not good enough, and you expect me to welcome you back with open arms? Is that how this works? She flinched at my tone but didn't back down. I don't expect anything, Jack. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I love you. I always have. You loved me while you were sneaking around with Peter for 2 years? I shot back. You loved me while you lied to my face and planned to leave me for him? Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't soften. Not yet. I was stupid, she said, her voice breaking. I was selfish. I let myself believe that what we had wasn't enough. But I see now that it was more than enough. You are more than enough, Jack. Please, give me another chance. Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But trust doesn't come back with a simple apology. I'll think about it, I said, finally standing up. But don't expect anything, Linda. You broke something that can't be easily fixed. She nodded, her face crumpling in defeat. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a flicker of hope. The days following our meeting were some of the most emotionally draining of my life. Linda's words echoed in my mind constantly. I miss you. I want to come home. Part of me wanted to believe her, to take her back and try to rebuild what we had lost. But another part of me, the part still raw from her betrayal, kept screaming that it was a mistake, that letting her back in would only lead to more heartbreak. I talked to our kids about it, hoping for some clarity. Michael's response was blunt. Dad, I love Mom, but she doesn't deserve a second chance. She made her choice. Don't let her walk all over you. Sarah was gentler, but just as firm. You have to do what feels right for you, Dad. But don't forget how much she hurt you. Trust is hard to rebuild, and you deserve to be happy. Their words stayed with me as I weighed my options. This wasn't just about Linda. It was about me, about my dignity, and about what kind of future I wanted to have. The following Sunday, Linda called again. Can we meet? She asked, her voice hesitant. I agreed, but this time I told her to come to the house. It felt fitting. If we were going to have this conversation, it should be in the place where our lives had been built and eventually broken. When she arrived, she looked even more fragile than before. She stepped inside hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. I gestured for her to sit at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd confronted her weeks ago. Have you thought about what I said? She asked quietly, her hands nervously gripping her coffee cup. I have, I said, sitting across from her, and I've come to a decision. She held her breath, her eyes wide with hope and fear. I can't forget what you did, Linda, I began. You broke my trust, and that's not something I can just sweep under the rug, but I also can't ignore the life we've built together, the good times, the memories, the family we created. Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent, letting me finish. So here's the deal, I continued. If you want to come back, you have to prove to me that you're serious about making this work. That means no contact with Peter, ever. It means counseling, together and individually, and it means being completely honest with me from now on. No secrets, no lies. Linda nodded quickly, her tears spilling over. I'll do anything, Jack, anything. I just want to fix this. Don't say it unless you mean it, I warned, my voice firm. Because if I catch even a hint that you're not being truthful, you're out. No second chances. This is it. I mean it, she said, her voice trembling. I swear, Jack, I'll do whatever it takes. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. Then we'll try. But I'm warning you, Linda. This isn't going to be easy, and it's going to take a long time before I can even begin to trust you again. She reached across the table, her hand trembling, and placed it over mine. I understand, she whispered. Thank you for giving me this chance. As she sat there crying softly, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult road. Letting Linda back into my life felt like stepping onto thin ice. Every word she said, every move she made, seemed to carry the weight of our broken trust. She moved back into the house a few days after our conversation. bringing only the essentials as if she was afraid to make herself too comfortable. We started counseling right away, just like I had insisted. The first session was awkward. The therapist, a kind but firm woman named Dr. Mason, asked us to talk about why we were there. Linda spoke first, her voice shaky but sincere. "I hurt Jack in ways I never thought possible," she said. "I betrayed his trust, and I regret it every single day. I want to make things right no matter how long it takes." Her words sounded genuine, but I couldn't help feeling a pang of skepticism. Was she truly sorry? Or was she just afraid of losing the life she'd grown comfortable with? When it was my turn, I laid it all out. "I'm here because I need answers," I said. "I need to understand why she did what she did, and I need to figure out if I can ever truly forgive her." Dr. Mason nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Forgiveness is a process," she said. "It doesn't happen overnight, but the fact that you're both here, willing to try, is a good start." The sessions forced us to confront things we'd both been avoiding for years. I learned that Linda had felt neglected at times, though she admitted that didn't excuse her actions. She opened up about insecurities I never knew she had, while I confessed to ways I might have unknowingly taken her for granted. Outside of therapy, things were tense. Linda was doing her best to prove herself, checking in regularly, being transparent about her schedule, and going out of her way to show she was committed. But for every step forward, there was a voice in my head reminding me of her betrayal. One night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, she reached over and took my hand. It was such a small gesture, but it felt monumental. For a moment, I let myself remember the good times, the years when things were simple, when her touch felt like home. "I know this doesn't fix anything," she said softly, her voice breaking into my thoughts, "but I want you to know how much I appreciate you giving me this chance." I looked at her, seeing the woman I'd loved for 40 years and the woman who had shattered my heart. "It's going to take time, Linda," I said. "A lot of time." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The weeks turned into months, and while things weren't perfect, we were making progress. The road ahead was still long, and the scars of her betrayal would never fully fade, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We weren't the same people we had been for years ago, and our marriage wasn't the same either, but maybe, just maybe, we could build something new from the ashes. 2 years had passed since Linda moved back in, and we began working on our marriage. We went through countless therapy sessions, long conversations, and many attempts to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. At first, it seemed like we were making progress. We spent more time together, created new memories, and tried to build a stronger foundation for our relationship. But the past never really left us. Even on our best days, there was a shadow hanging over everything, a reminder of the betrayal and the pain it had caused. Every now and then, something small would trigger a memory, a song on the radio, a restaurant we used to visit, or even a casual comment. No matter how much I wanted to forgive and forget, the cracks in our foundation were still there, and they were widening. Linda tried her best. She was open, attentive, and did everything she could to make me feel secure again. But deep down, I knew that trust, once broken, could never truly be restored. The love we once had felt more like an obligation now, a faint echo of what it used to be. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Linda broke the silence. "Jack," she said softly, "I think we need to talk." I looked at her, already knowing what she was about to say. "Go on," I replied, my voice calm but heavy. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I don't think this is working. I've tried so hard to fix things, but I can see it in your eyes. You don't look at me the same way anymore. And honestly, I don't blame you." For a moment, I didn't respond. She was right. No matter how much I wanted to deny it, we were living as two people trying to hold on to something that no longer existed. "I've been thinking the same thing," I admitted finally. "We gave it our best shot, but some things just can't be fixed." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a pang of sadness, not for what we were losing now, but for what we had lost long ago. We decided to separate amicably. There was no screaming, no blame, no harsh words, just two people acknowledging that their time together had come to an end. A few months later, our divorce was finalized. Linda moved into a small apartment nearby, and I stayed in the house. We remained on good terms, occasionally meeting for coffee or family events, but the chapter of our lives as husband and wife was over. Looking back now, I don't regret the years we spent together, nor do I regret giving her a second chance. Those years taught me about resilience, forgiveness, and the limits of love. Sometimes love isn't enough to heal everything, and that's okay. As I sit here writing this, I feel a strange sense of peace. Life goes on, and so do we. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best ending we could have hoped for. The first year after the divorce was the hardest. Every corner of the house carried memories of Linda. The kitchen where we had once cooked together, the porch where we had sipped coffee on quiet mornings, the living room couch where we had sat through countless evenings, sometimes laughing, sometimes arguing, but always together. Now each space felt hollow, a museum of a life that no longer existed. At first I dreaded mornings. Waking up alone was like being reminded every day of what I had lost. I would reach across the bed out of habit, only to find emptiness. The silence pressed down on me, louder than any noise could ever be. But as weeks turned into months, the silence became something else. An unwelcome guest at first, but eventually a companion. I threw myself into routines. I started walking every morning, something Linda used to do alone. At first I wondered if she had walked those same trails while secretly planning her meetings with Peter. But over time I reclaimed them. Those walks became mine, a chance to breathe, to clear my head, to remind myself that I was still alive, still capable of finding peace. Sarah and Michael were constant sources of support. Sarah invited me for dinner often, always making sure I didn't spend too much time isolated. Michael would call and check in, sometimes dropping by just to sit with me and talk about anything but the divorce. Their love was a lifeline, a reminder that not everything had been broken. Over time, Linda and I settled into a strange rhythm of civility. We saw each other during family gatherings, birthdays, holidays, moments when our paths inevitably crossed. We spoke politely, never lingering on the past. The bitterness had dulled, replaced with something quieter, acknowledgement, maybe even mutual respect. I noticed that Linda seemed smaller somehow, not physically but in spirit. The confident woman who once commanded every room now appeared fragile, as if life had worn her down. Part of me pitied her, but another part reminded me that she had carved this path herself. Choices have consequences, and she was living with hers. As for Peter, he faded from the picture entirely. I never asked what happened between them, and Linda never offered an explanation. Perhaps he left her. Perhaps she realized too late that he wasn't worth the destruction. Either way, it didn't matter. By the time she tried to return to me, too much damage had already been done. One evening, nearly a year after the divorce, I found myself back in the attic. I stumbled across the same photo album I had discovered during those painful days of separation. This time, when I flipped through it, I didn't feel the same sharp ache. Instead, I felt a kind of peace. The photos told the story of a life that had been real. Yes, it had ended in betrayal, but that didn't erase the decades of laughter, love, and family we had created. The good had existed, the bad had come later. Both were true, and both were part of the story. For the first time, I allowed myself to let go, not just of Linda, but of the anger, the resentment, the what-ifs. Holding on had only weighed me down. Releasing it didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing not to let it define me. Life slowly began to open again. I traveled, something Linda and I had always talked about but rarely did. I visited places I had only seen in books, mountains, coastlines, small towns with hidden charm. Each trip reminded me that life was far from over. I reconnected with old friends, too, some I hadn't seen in decades. We shared meals, stories, laughter. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again, not just Jack and Linda, but simply Jack. There were moments of loneliness, of course. nights when I sat alone at the kitchen table and felt the echo of what once was. But instead of despair, I began to feel gratitude. Gratitude for the years we had shared, gratitude for the family we had raised, gratitude for the chance to keep living, even if the path had changed. One day, Sarah asked me if I regretted it all, if I regretted marrying Linda, building a life with her, giving her a second chance. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. No, I said honestly, I don't regret it, even with everything that happened. Those years taught me about resilience, forgiveness, and about the limits of love. Sometimes love isn't enough to heal everything, and that's okay. She smiled softly, tears in her eyes, and hugged me. I'm proud of you, Dad. Looking back now, I realize that life doesn't always give us neat, tidy endings. Sometimes it gives us scars instead. But scars aren't signs of weakness, they're proof of survival. Linda will always be part of my story. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the years of trying and failing to rebuild. It's all part of the tapestry of my life. But so are the good times, the laughter, the memories. Nothing can erase either side of the truth. As I sit here writing this, I feel a sense of peace I never thought possible. I don't know what the future holds. New love, perhaps, or maybe just more years of quiet solitude. But whatever comes, I know I'll face it with strength I didn't know I had, because life goes on, and so do I. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best ending anyone can hope for.